Mel Rodriguez, it is a great pleasure to chat with you this afternoon.
Oh man, it's good to be here. Good to see you.
Listen, great seeing you. I was doing a quick background, looking up some stuff. You worked with Pedro Zamora in a play. That's a name from a blast from the past.
Isn't it? Yeah, man, what a great guy. That was actually one of my first theater experiences, and we tour this play called The Inner Circle, which was about AIDS and AIDS awareness. And Pedro, man, like he was a real, he was a hero. You know what I mean? He was gay when it was and out when it was really kind of not popular to be out. And he was living with HIV and AIDS when it was a death sentence. And and afterwards we do a Q&A with him after we did this play, the Inner Circle. And I don't know, something about the gravity of all that, being with him and knowing that he was going to probably pass away within the next few years, gave lent an importance to the work we were doing in a way that kind of changed my entire life. Yeah.
Well, fast forwarding to present time, so we're not dwelling on the past, and we do
Yeah.
miss Pedro because we remember
Yeah.
him from Real World Season 3 in San Francisco. We are talking about your latest, how do we describe this? Dramedy? Dark comedy, The
Oh my
Residence?
goodness, it's probably a very dark comedy because there's a murder involved for
Right,
sure, a dark comedy, but it's funny and it's not funny and slapstick funny,
right.
although, it's grounded, real situational funny.
Oh no, it's like the humor is dark and it's very
Yeah.
witty. It's not like
Oh yeah.
trying to insult the audience, which is
Right.
something I really appreciate. And it also forces you to reflect on your own darkness and your sense of humor because there are certain things that are like, maybe I shouldn't be laughing at Bruce this way.
Right. 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 Absolutely. Yeah, I think these characters are just so human, which is really cool. And they remind us of ourselves, which is what good writing does.
And the White House is a huge building, and
Man.
it's interesting to see how, for those of us that have never visited the White House, we've seen images, so at least we have a point of reference for certain
Right.
things versus the soundstage versus what the reality is. Is
Right.
it interesting to see the soundstage the way it is and the setting? And then
Well,
I don't know if you've actually been to the White House or not and see how close it is.
I've never see that. I was going to say I've never been, so this is the closest to the White House that I've gotten. I think I've gotten a pretty good idea of it. I mean, you know, this is the part of the White House that really no one has access to. This is the cut off velvet rope part, with the Secret Service standing there that you're just not allowed in. And I feel like the way, I mean, we built the set. It was literally the interior of the White House built on 6 sound stages in Hollywood. And, I was telling somebody recently, like, it was amazing. Like, you go from Hollywood, you get off the 101 or the 405 in traffic, which is one of the freeways here in LA. And you get on this thing and you walk through a door and it's like a porthole. You're suddenly in it. And it does something, it's a little jarring to the mind a couple times because you're in the White House. And the only like reference that you're on a set is if you look up and there's no ceilings because that's the way, movie magic is done. But
Well, the interesting thing with all of this, other than the movie magic aspect, is you have, I mean, he started off as a comedian and a comedic writer and then eventually becomes a senator, Al Franken, who's in the series,
Oh man, we
which
were
just
just talking
adds,
about that.
yeah,
I know.
which adds even more realism to it. So we're not sure if we're supposed to laugh
Right,
or sit
right,
there and go, wow, we have a real senator involved with this.
right. And I like that. I think, I like that. Like I said, it's grounded and it's
Right.
very grounded. And so when you do laugh, it's earned laughter. You know, it's because the situation, you can imagine yourself in that situation. You can imagine somebody doing this insane, totally hilarious thing if they were put in those circumstances, like how would you react?
Is there ever a fear? And you can see I'm trying to dance around this because I'm trying not to give spoilers because I want people to go
Yeah.
watch it on Netflix. And I
Yes.
was like, I don't want to sit there. And in episode 3, this happened, and then in episode 6, that
Yeah,
happened, and
I
like
know.
go all over the
It's
place. So
it's
it's
a
hard
hard
not
one
to
because
give
it's a murder
spoilers.
mystery. Yeah.
So let's go this way. So I knew somebody that wrote a comic. It was
Yeah.
it was about politics,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden he started getting calls from the federal government going, "Who told you? And how do you know this?" And he's like, "I was just making stuff up." Is there ever that fear in how close you could get? Like, this is so absurd. We think this is ridiculous. And then all of a sudden the red phone rings and going, who told you? And
Oh,
who's
well,
your insider?
there was a weird thing that happened because, we go all throughout, like I said, this like restricted area that people don't have access to. And there was, I'd imagine they absolutely did have a couple of those phone calls because there were times where I was watching it or reading it and seeing the stuff where, that, not to give too much away, but they remove at some point the walls from the back of the White House. So you're able to see completely into all these floors and the inside, the bowels of this building and everything really. And I thought, well, this is kind of a map. I never knew like what this looked like or what it was. And I don't know, maybe somebody that's not that well intentioned suddenly has a map to this thing. That did kind of scare me a little bit. You know what I mean?
No, because that
Um,
would totally terrify me because I don't want to get the phone call of who told you.
right.
Yeah.
That's above my pay grade. I'm sure that went to like a producer or a Netflix, the
Oh, of course.
Netflix department. But
Right,
I'm
but
sure
every
that,
once in a while they're gonna sit there and go, "All right, you played Bruce. Bruce reminds us of I don't know. I'm gonna throw out a fake name here, Steve." And then
right.
Steve actually had a real life situation like that. Who told you about Steve?
No, I've gotten no calls from three-letter agencies yet, you know.
The only three-letter agency we want calling you is your agent to book
Yes,
another season
that's right.
of a
That's
wonderful
right.
show.
Right.
Yeah. Take us through the process of being cast as Bruce in this series, because this is an ensemble cast. You're a
Yeah.
tremendous character actor. You can transform from drama to comedy to all over the place, and finding this balance within darkness and humor. Did they sit there and go, Mel can do this, or did you actually have to go through a regular audition process?
Well, I've been around a long time, and I guess, I'm honored that, that I get offers now. Still audition for some things, but they really did think of me for this, and I was incredibly honored because it was Shonda Rhimes and Paul William Davies, and like everything she does is just, Bridgerton or like, How to Get Away with Murder, Grey's Anatomy. Like she only does really like top of the line stuff, pedigree stuff. And to be thought of that way was really incredible. And then, I got cast a little later on in the process, so I was aware of the cast list, Uzo Aduba and like Jason Lee, Giancarlo Esposito, Isaiah Whitlock, Ken Marino. Like it was like the who's who of the actors in our industry. And I think it was just really cool, man, to be. I think, you do this a long time and you don't know how you're perceived or and stuff. And it was just kind of I think it was kind of like kind of a thumbs up to like what I had been doing in the past and the way that I am perceived, which was, that I'm peers of these incredible talented people who I've always admired and respected, you know?
And you pull off an amazing feat with this show just
Yeah.
because it's so grounded in reality as you've mentioned and the
Yeah.
realism that's there that I almost forget, oh, it's Mel Rodriguez, and start seeing the character Bruce as a real life person.
Yes, that was, well, my job is done, man. You know what I mean? Like you know, it's interesting the way I approach this stuff is always that's the stuff that's funny to me and humorous, even in when comedy comes out of drama per se. You know what I mean? Is that these real situations, that's the way I approach everything is if you were this person in these circumstances, how would you respond based on your past, how you perceive the world, and you get all that information from an amazing script like that, where people are saying things about you that you're learning from. There's a world you're in which was so well established that you're learning from. It was based on a book called The Residents, which was amazing, and there were all these stories about these guys that had, these people who had worked in the White House for years and dedicated their lives to this. I think the really cool thing for me is we always see that story of like, the politicians and the West Wing and, stuff that many of us cannot relate to, but we can relate to being in service of, of a job, having a job. And essentially that's what they have. They have this job. It's a very, very important job. They're not allowed to talk about this job. You know what I mean? But, um, you read some of these stories and these people dedicated to being of service to our country, and yeah, and you don't hear about them. And I just, I wanted, when I read the script, when approaching somebody, I read the script, I get all that information. I'm a big meditator. And so I'll meditate and this will he'll start to come together, the character. And then I have this weird thing that happens where every role I've ever done, I like to go out and I love to people watch, and I always meet the character. And I don't know what really, and I don't know what it is, if it's, karmic laws or the universe at work or something that's beyond my control, but I end up seeing Bruce at a coffee shop. And it was Bruce, this guy that I had imagined and I built. And what I do as an actor is I go up to him, I tell him I'm an actor, and hey, could you tell me a little bit about yourself? I'm going to try to play you or your role. And I take their body language and I learn about them and their past. And I met a guy who was a foreman on a construction site, was very, very, and had also been, it's funny because I had no idea he was a foreman on a construction site. I had no idea that he was union, and I had no idea that he had a degree in engineering, but I found him. He came, and it was just really cool. And that's the sort of magic that kind of happens for me. And then, I'm able to kind of play. I love being a shapeshifter, man. And I love people.
Well, it also helps that you lost 60 pounds.
Yes, that's true.
Speaking of shapeshifting.
Oh man. Yeah, I've struggled with that my whole life. I've been up and down my whole life. And so I don't know, I have kids and it's hard to carry around all that weight, man. And so I really had to address it. So I'm glad I've been able to, you
Well,
know.
one thing I want to mention in all of this is that, these characters that you guys are playing, when there is a government shutdown, these are the first people to stop getting paychecks as well. So they've put their life in this
That's
world of
right.
servitude. And then all of a sudden, like
Yeah.
I'm going to go missing for saying this, but I was like, remember, all the senators and Congress people and everybody else, and representatives, they all went to the same colleges. They all went to the same grad schools. They all attend the same orgies. They all sit there and have, you know, and
Right.
they all sit there and collect the same paycheck. We're shutting down the government for your benefit, and we're going to keep you shut down. You're still getting your paycheck.
Yeah.
Somebody like Bruce is wait a minute, like I'm furloughed. What happened to me?
Well, I think
So,
what we're discovering
yeah.
is, which is, important too, is that, these people have to become part of the conversation. You know what I mean? More, much
Mhm.
more. And I think that, less and less they're becoming wherever your political, feelings lie, or, Democrat or Republican or whatever, that's a touchy subject. I don't want to get into any of that. But
No,
the
we're not
truth
getting into
is,
that
is that
because at the end of the day, it's the average person
it's the
that's
average
working
person
there
that ends up
that's out of
suffering.
luck.
Yeah. 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 So
And then to witness everything just makes it even harder.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a supporting actor. I'm not a lead actor. I'm one of those people. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like really to some degree, like it affects my bottom line and it affects my family and it's affecting everyone at this point.
Mhm.
So yeah. No, I mean, I don't think those considerations are taking place that
Right.
need to be taking place.
Well, it's always like the first rule we learned in journalism school was become friends with the janitor and the secretary
That's
because they
right.
consider one has all the keys and the other one has the schedule.
That's right. They've
So
got dibs on you for sure.
exactly.
They
So,
know you.
you want to be
Yeah,
friends with these people,
that's
not just
right.
because they can give you access, but because you want to be a decent human being.
That's true. Yeah, you can tell a lot about a person by the way they treat their waiter,
Yeah.
or somebody who's in a position of servitude.
Mel, unfortunately,
It's definitely informing.
absolutely. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I got to ask you this. It's the weekend. We're trying to relax, yet the world is falling apart. We kind of want to pay attention to politics, but not really. Give
That's
us
right.
that
And here's
one-line
the
pitch
answer.
on this series.
If you need a laugh, which I think we all need a laugh right now, you're in for a laugh. Come check out The Residents. Really, absolutely.
Fantastic. And where can we find you on social media?
I'm at Real Mel Rodriguez.
Mel, we got to do this in person next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Residence is on Netflix right now. All episodes streaming. Congratulations. Can't wait to do this again.
Thank you, brother. Likewise.